everybody. Today is Friday, June 13th, and this is your Arkansas Daily Briefing. And yes, you did hear that right. Today is Friday the 13th. So I thought we'd take a quick look at what makes Friday the 13th so spooky. So it's a mashup of two long-standing superstitions. Friday has been considered unlucky since the Middle Ages. Some trace that back to the day that Jesus was crucified. And 13 has long been viewed as a cursed number because there were 13 people at the Last Supper. And in Norse mythology, a trickster god crashed a party of 12 and chaos followed. Even in some modern buildings, they may actually skip the 13th floor. So put that together and you get what's known as, there's even a word for the fear of Friday the 13th. Let's see if I can get this right. It's Paraskevidekatriophobia. That is the fear of Friday the 13th. But really, Friday the 13th is not that rare. It shows up at least once and sometimes up to 3 times every year. And weirdly, the 13th is more likely to fall on a Friday than any other day of the week, thanks to how our calendar works. All right, on to the news. We're going to start with a follow-up on that heartbreaking story out of Saline County. As I mentioned yesterday, a 15-year-old girl was killed by a pack of dogs on Wednesday near Alexander, Arkansas. And now law enforcement have confirmed that 14 dogs have been put down. All of them either Pitbulls, Pitbull mixes, or hounds. Authorities say there were around 30 dogs total on the property, and the remaining animals have been removed and turned over to local rescues. And also, as we talked about, this was not some out-of-the-blue incident. The property, which is a private residence, had been the subject of multiple complaints to law enforcement about the dogs before this tragedy occurred. So moving over to some legal news, a Confederate statue that stood in MacArthur Park for more than a century was hauled off during the political unrest of 2020. Now, a Pulaski County judge says the city of Little Rock violated state law when it did so and has 10 days to start fixing it. The statue was called a Memorial to Company A, Capitol Guards, and it was installed in 1911 as part of a reunion of Confederate veterans. So the statue was actually a depiction of a bronze Confederate soldier standing tall over a stone pedestal in one of the city's oldest public parks. But in June 2020, as monuments around the country were being targeted during the BLM protests, Little Rock took it down. Not through a public vote or anything, it just removed it and placed it in storage. Then in May of 2021, just days after the Arkansas legislature passed a law that restricts the removal of historic monuments, the city returned to finish the job, quietly tearing down the pedestal that remained of the statue. Now, that 2021 law that was passed requires local governments to get a waiver from the Arkansas History Commission before removing or relocating any historic monument. And Judge Patricia James ruled on Thursday that Little Rock never did that, and they must now go back and apply for one. Judge James stopped short of ordering that the statue be put back, saying that the law doesn't give her that authority, but she made clear that the law does require compliance and that the city failed to comply. Mayor Frank Scott Jr. has made his position clear. He said he, quote, speaks for the city and that the statue, in his words, will not return to what he deems the civil rights city. A violent inmate who is already convicted of murder is now facing more than 400 years in prison after stabbing 2 jail deputies at the Sebastian County Jail in an attack so brutal that it nearly killed one of them. John Anthony Cole was in custody for shooting a man in Fort Smith and for the murder and dismemberment of another man in Arizona. He turned a piece of jail equipment into a weapon. It was a metal rod from a mop bucket, and he fashioned that into a crude but deadly spear. Last month, Cole launched a sudden and targeted attack on Deputy Jacob Marr and Lieutenant Brandon McCaslin. The deputies were inside a cell with Cole alone when the stabbing began, and it was all caught on surveillance video so we can be sure of what happened. Deputy Marr, 33 years old, was stabbed 7 times. One of those wounds pierced his lung, and another went through his neck and punctured his aorta. The injuries were life-threatening. He was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery and endured a long and painful recovery. Lieutenant McCaslin, who's 51, was stabbed 5 times in the back and arm while trying to stop the assault. And this wasn't a spontaneous thing. Video shows Cole threatening both men beforehand, and in court, he openly admitted that he intended to harm them, saying he would burn McCaslin. Now, Cole pleaded guilty to the attack on May 30th, and now, in addition to his previous murder charges, he's facing 4.5 centuries behind bars. It was a long day at the Arkansas Board of Education this week, and when it was over, Quitman coach DJ Mars walked away with a year-long suspension, 2 years of probation, and a pile of required coursework and oversight. DJ Mars is the head football and track coach and the assistant athletic director at Quitman High School. He came under scrutiny after serious allegations of bullying and harassment inside the junior high locker room surfaced last May. So on Thursday, the State Board of Education suspended his teaching license for 1 year, as well as giving him 2 years of probation after that, during which he can teach, but only under strict conditions and regular reporting. And the board didn't just go with the original recommendation, which was milder. They increased the punishment after a full hearing, saying that Mars failed to take appropriate responsibility and action for what happened. So what did happen? Well, the core allegations involved incidents like humping, plus the use of a whip and gel blasters in the locker room. A third-party investigation backed up the claims, and criminal charges were filed against some of the boys. One of those boys, who was on probation after a juvenile conviction, was allowed back on the football team that fall. Yes, he was allowed to play on the team that fall. When asked about that Thursday, Mars admitted that that was true, but said the coaching staff staggered locker room time and rotated players to keep perpetrators away from their victims. Board member Jeff Wood pointed to district policy, which says that students on court-ordered probation or suspension aren't supposed to participate in extracurricular activities. Mars's attorney countered that another policy gives the principal discretion, and that's what they used. Board members also pointed to earlier red flags, including students bringing boxing gloves into the locker room 2 years earlier for what Mars called organized fights. But one of the board members told him, hey, that was your first red flag. But instead, it was looked at as an isolated incident. The board members said that Mars failed to deliver real consequences for bad actors, and that allowing the offending students back on the team sent the wrong message to the victims, to the team, and to the community. Mars did tell the board that the May 10th locker room report from a parent was the first time that he or his assistant coaches had heard of the behavior. And this isn't the only fallout from that incident. Coach Mars and Quitman Superintendent Michael Stacks previously filed a defamation lawsuit against 2 mothers who spoke out at a state board meeting. That case was dropped in April, but with plans to refile it and possibly new allegations added to that. Stacks, by the way, isn't just a superintendent. He also holds the titles of athletic director and principal at Quitman High, a consolidation that one parent called part of the district's accountability problem. Now, 2 of the victims' parents were at Thursday's hearing. They didn't speak, but they told the press afterward that they were grateful for the board's decision. And finally, if hunting a 10-foot alligator under the moonlight sounds like your idea of a good time, applications for the 2025 Arkansas alligator hunting season open June 15th at 8 a.m. and will stay open through midnight July 14th. You can apply online at agfc.com. As in past years, these public land hunts are limited entry only, and they're all in the southern half of the state. Hunters can choose from 10 designated public areas, including Millwood Lake, the Pine Bluff Arsenal's Yellow Lake, and the Delta Wetland Complex. One key change this year, Millwood Lake will have a quota system. That means even if you draw a permit, you'll need to check each night to see if the gator harvest quota has been met before heading out. If the quota's full, the hunt's off. According to Arkansas Game and Fish, too many hunters in past years have held out for that monster gator, passing up legal ones and ending the season empty-handed. With a quota in place, the hope is hunters will take the shot when they have it. This year's public land hunt will include 41 total permits spread across 3 management zones. Each permit allows you to harvest 1 alligator at least 4 feet long during the designated season dates, which are September 19th to 22nd and September 26th to 29th. Hunting is limited to nighttime hours, 30 minutes after sunset to 30 minutes before sunrise. Now, if you've got access to private land in one of the gator zones, you can bypass the draw and buy a private land tag, but you're still subject to the zone's quota and rules. So, gator season is on its way. If you want in, get your name in the hat starting June 15th. All right, that's it for your Friday the 13th briefing. Everybody stay safe and have a great weekend.